Hello. So, hopefully, you received the earlier material, and now we are going to look at the book Fluency in English, which is your recommended book. And we're looking at the last chapter in here, Unit 15, Understanding Drama. And the play that we've been studying, we've been discussing, is called Her Name is Bharti, and it is by Joydeep Bhattacharya. Right. So we discussed the basic themes of the play, and today I am just going to go through the reading comprehension questions so that you have an idea. I hope by now you've completed a reading of the play and you're well aware about the characters, the themes, and like. Okay, so the first question is, this play shows us people from different classes and backgrounds. Mandira and Anuttam, who belong to the upper class, Kajol belongs to the working class, while Subodh comes to the middle class. Do you think that the class they belong to largely conditions their reactions to the woman being paraded naked and beaten to death? How are they different? Can the reactions of Mandira and Anuttam be further categorized on the basis of their gender? What about Kajol and Kuri? Are their reactions too based on gender? So, if you look at the question carefully, the question is addressing specific characters, right? And on the basis of which class, which economic background, and which gender do the characters belong to. The question is asking us to answer what reactions do they show to the event in the play. What is the event in the play? The event in the play is of this woman who is thought to have committed some sort of a crime about which we do not have an idea even until the end of the play. So she is being taken out on the street, paraded naked, and she is also being brutalized by the mob around her, right? So you remember that part from the play, and now we are looking at different classes and backgrounds of characters. So, for answering this question, you need to keep in mind what different backgrounds do the characters belong to and how were their reactions throughout the play in terms of how they reacted to the woman in question, right? The woman whom we later identify as Bharti. Okay, so the first part is Mandira and Anuttam. Now, Mandira and Anuttam are who? Mandira and Anuttam are the two protagonists of the play, the family which we are talking about, and Mandira is the wife, Anuttam is the husband. As we said, they are both upper class educated people, right? And Kajol, who is their maid servant, who's their house help, is working class. Then remember Subodh. Subodh is Anuttam's friend, his neighbor, right? Subodh comes from the middle classes. How are their reactions different, right? And do you think, what is the question really saying? Do you think that the class they belong to largely conditions their reactions to the woman being paraded naked, right? So we have to look at whether the reactions that the characters are showing are in a way related to the class that they belong to, right? Class in terms of upper class, middle class, and lower classes. So, how does Mandira and Anuttam react? Right? Mandira is panicking at the sight of the woman. She wants to do something. Remember, she wants a civilized solution to the problem. Right? Anuttam is also, worried, but he works on the insistence of Mandira. Right? He does not want to go out on the street immediately when he's coaxed and cajoled by his wife. Then Anuttam decides, and what kind of help is he looking for? He's looking for help from the police, the administration, right? And when he finds that nothing can be done on that front, he has no real escape because they're looking for organized forms, organized structures, people in power who can help or intervene in this situation, right? So this is of course an upper class scenario, an upper class response to the problem, right? So of course this is how their response is conditioned by the class they belong to. Now Kajol, remember Kajol, who's the maid servant, has some clue about what is going on. And Kajol comes up with this idea saying that she has done something and she is a witch, she is a bitch, right? And she she has committed some sort of adultery and all of that. And therefore, the punishment that she is getting is justified, right? So we have an idea also that the woman here, the woman in question here, Bharti, is also belonging from the same kind of class, because Kajol is the one who tells us that she lives in the slum next to hers, right? Next to the slum of Kajol lives the woman Bharti, right? So now we see that Kajol is applauding the reaction of the mob towards this woman. She thinks what the mob is doing is completely justified. Now, this is how the women in the lower classes are conditioned. They would not think of civilized solutions to the problems. They would not go think of going to the police. They would not think of going to the administration. They want justice there, and then this kind of an extravagant punishment is also allowed, is also in a way conditioned for the woman, and that is justified for the lower classes. So her reaction is also justified in terms of the class position that she belongs to, right? Next is Subodh. Remember, Subodh and Kajol are the ones who are talking about the gory details, about the grotesque details, about very explicit details in terms of how is the woman being beaten up and how is she reacting to this whole situation, what are the people saying, right? So they're more aware and they're more closer to the community to be aware of all this problem also, right? Which shows that the distance that the upper classes enjoy in terms of how Mandira and Anuttam are still these witnesses who are not really part of the situation on their own, who have not ventured out on the streets while the mob was carrying out, and they're not really a part of the episode. But Subodh and Kajol know the insider's view of this whole scenario, right? So now Subodh is somebody who is going to tell us the gory details. And then again, Mandara scolds him, saying that you are enjoying giving out these details, you enjoy this kind of a violence, and she completely abhors him, right? So his reaction also, the three kinds of responses to the woman Bharti that he tells us about are also a very middle class sort of a reaction, wherein there is some amount of suspicion, some amount of superstition, and some amount of a genuine, realistic question that he's putting forth. So we've discussed how are all these reactions different and are based on their particular classes. Now can the reactions of Mandara and Anuttam be further categorized on the basis of their gender, right? What about Kajol and Kuri? Are their reactions too based in gender? Right. So as far as the reactions of Kajol and Mandara are concerned, sorry, Mandara and Anuttam are concerned, we already said that Mandara comes across as this personality who is more and more affected by the violence, right? She's the one who first of all sees it, she's the one who reacts to it, and then she is the one who is forcing Anuttam to take a decision, to intervene in the situation. So she is the distant observer, right? While Anuttam is supposed to intervene. So they've stuck to their gender roles. But in terms of the decision, in terms of the intervention, we also see that Mandara is the one who's more affected, right? She cannot tolerate this entire scene. However, Anuttam is the one who is, more calm and composed about the whole scenario, who says that we do not know much, we are still in the dark, let us see. And the police adopts a strategy of inaction in these times, right? So his reaction is more rational, but also more distant. So, again, based on their gender and gender roles. About Kuri and Kajol, and you know, uh, we see that Kuri is the one who's a rebellious figure who wants to go out in the street and find out why is all of this happening, and Kajol is the one who's justifying it. So Kajol and Kuri's reactions, if we say, are more or less based in their own situations. Kajol's reaction, especially, is based in her class. Kuri, on the other hand, is responding to this entire situation as a young woman, right? Who is wanting answers, who's curious about this entire episode and cannot tolerate the complacency of her parents or anybody else in this whole scenario, right? Okay, so the next question here is, can the difference in the reactions of Granny, Mandara, and Kuri also be seen as reactions of three different generations? How are they different, right? So, are these reactions based on their generation? How does the grandmother react? How does Kuri react? And how does Mandara react, right? So, we are seeing three generations of women here, right? The grandmother, Mandara, who's the mother, and Kuri, who's the daughter of Mandara, right? So we see that the grandmother is paralyzed and she cannot really react, but her reaction is in the gestures that we see. She has, or she looks frightened, right? And when finally she gets to know that the woman is safe, she has not suffered anything, right? She is still alive. So finally, uh, she's better, right? She's feeling healthy, right? So a very passive old age lady kind of a reaction that we see from the grandmother. Then talking about the reaction by Mandara, Mandara is firstly very panicked, right? Then she wants to do something, but she does not know how. So this second generation, the dilemma of the second generation, the dilemma of the mother, right? The dilemma of the wife, because now she also turns very skeptical about the security and the safety of her children and of her own husband, because she says she stops Kuri from going out and looking at it. She wants to keep the daughter safe from looking at such a heinous sort of a scenario, right? And then Kuri, who is the most young, who's the most vibrant, who's the most rebellious, is wanting to venture out despite not having the permission from her parents. She finds a way out along with her brother to go and visit the woman to see what is all of this about, right? So the young rebellious streak within her is a characteristic of this entire reaction that she has, right? So again, the reactions are also generational. Now, the third question is the play about the first part, the violence inherent in our society, the helplessness of the middle class, or the defiance of the older generation by the younger generation, or the adventurousness of the younger generation. So, the play is, as we see, mostly about the younger, about the violence inherent in our society. Of course, the other issues are being touched upon, but the major central theme of the play is about the violence that is inherent in our society. Right. Now, the next question is, Satyajit Ray's film Devi is about a society desperate to put its women on a pedestal and treat them as goddesses while denying them their basic humanity. Do you think that Bharati too is a victim of the same attitude? As we see that Bharati is also offered, these offerings. She is looked at as a goddess. She is worshipped as this goddess Kali, right? But she is denied her basic humanity. Nobody is willing to get her treated. Nobody is, uh, giving her the basic human rights. As we see even early on in the play, just because she survived those injuries and she is not dead by all the wounds that people have showered on her, we assume that she's become this goddess, right? But people have not treated her like a goddess at all. Her modesty, her own character, her nature, everything has been, has been loved at, and therefore we cannot say that she has really been treated as a goddess. But this is characterized by this is characteristic of our Indian society, that women are said to be worshipped as goddesses, and by calling them goddesses, all their basic human rights are also taken away. Right. So the next question, can the other women in the play, Mandira, Kajol, Kuri, the grandmother, also be seen as victims? Can we see the other women in the play as victims at all? Right? Mandira, Kuri, the grandmother, or Kajol. So, of course, victims in terms of not only a physical sort of a violence, but the victims to patriarchy, to these structures of society that ascribe them these gender roles, that ascribe them these oppressions inherent, these violence inherent in the society, right? So, of course, they can be seen as victims, right, in their own specific ways. And I'll hope that you'll be able to understand in what ways can they be understood as victims, right? So the next question, question number 6 here, says, do you think that Indian society can be divided into three main groups, as so both divides them? One who treat Bharti as a goddess, the other who treats her like a witch, and the third who would like to wash their hands of her, right? So another question that requires some thinking on our parts. So the first thing is, do we have these three sections in our society? Whenever some cases of these kind emerge, do we have some people who will treat the person in question like a goddess, just as they treat Bharti, right? Then do we have somebody who would just wash their hands of the entire situation, not wanting to say anything about it? And the third, about some people who would characterize her as a witch, right? So the good goddess, the bad witch, or just staying neutral about it, not saying anything about it, right? So all of this we see coming forth multiple times in society, right? Whenever there is a question about a woman, these are the three responses that we generally get, right? That she's a good woman, she's a bad woman, or people do not want to say anything about this entire situation, right? Okay. So the next question, what would be the civilized solution to the problem of Bharti? Right? Remember, Mandira is always insisting on this civilized solution to the problem that we are facing, right? And she is constantly blaming people that they do not want a civilized solution, right? So civilized solution would have been that if there was anything that was wrong with the woman, she should have been taken to the police, right? And her crime had to be reported, and the legal authorities would have pursued the matter accordingly. But we see that this does not happen in the case of Bharti, so there is no civilized solution. Then also this oncoming mob and all of that has to be avoided, which is not avoided at this instance. So the next question, question number 8, is, do you think that we are a civilized society? Now the kind of reaction that we have, the mob that we have, and the way they are brutalizing, making this woman run naked on the street, and not looking for any sort of, police or a legal solution to this, uh, suggests that we are not a civilized society, because a civilized society wouldn't resort to violence of this kind, right, to solve any sort of a problem, even if it is a moral problem. Okay, so the next question is question number 9. In a civilized society, might is not right, right? So this question is also your hint to the previous question. Might is not right. Might, what do we mean by that? That, your will or your power, your strength is not right. The weak and the defenseless are to be cared for before the strong and the capable. Remember, she's a woman, right? She's a very weak, frail woman without rights, without people supporting her, without, any family being that we can see with her. So she's a lonely, alone, weak, fragile woman, and women's rights, come forth. But here we see that instead of understanding what her problem was, understanding the vulnerability of the woman, it is exploited, right? So when you exploit the weak, the fragile, then it is not a civilized society. So, do you think ours is a civilized society? We have already said that this is not a civilized society. Now, the next question is Bharti's tongue has been cut off, yet she cannot be silenced. Her eyes speak. The grandmother does not utter a single word throughout the play, yet she seems to understand everything. The moment she is convinced that Bharti will live, her crisis is over. Why is silence important in this play? Right. So, this question is really about violence and the silence around this entire violence, right? So, we see that Bharti does not say a word, right? Similarly, the grandmother does not say a word, right? These are silences which are very, very vital, very, very integral to the play in terms of how people respond to the violence. Now, these are the most frail, weakest people, weakest women that we see in the play. The grandmother is immobile, she's an old lady, right? And she is weak, diseased. Similarly, Bharti is brutalized, she is a weak, frail young woman, right? And she is also brutalized so thoroughly without any aid or help, right? She is also attacked. So, and both of these women keep silent throughout the play. They only react in gestures, right? So we see that they are completely silent, resiliently tolerating everything that is coming their way, but they understand everything. And that understanding is the most crucial, right? So this is not like because they're not speaking, they do not understand, or because they're not speaking, their violence, the attack on them, their pain, their grief, and everything can go unnoticed. There is a stronger statement being made here by adhering to this kind of a silence, that women rarely respond with silence many a times when they're forced into situations like these. But is that silence the only answer, right? Because this silence is what is characteristic of their own resilience, their strength, their tenacity, and this is not that they're mute victims. They hold the power to change this, right? And they are saying something even though they are really silent. This silence is what Bharti silence, right, is what moves Kuri, right, into introspection. And then in this introspection moves Mandira. Right? So this silence on Bharti's part is an agent of various changes in this entire journey of all the women in the play. right? Be it Kuri, be it Mandara, be it the grandmother, because they understand the dynamics of how violence and silence work together for women. Okay. So the next question is, why are we told the name of the woman only at the very end of the play, and in such a throwaway fashion by Bumba? Is her name significant in what way? So at the end of the play, we are told that the woman is called Bharti, and now, this is said by Bumba. Bumba, who's the youngest child in the play, and he also gives away the name, just like throwing away the name, without much significance attached to it. But of course, it holds a larger significance because Bharti is like characteristic of Bharat, right? Bharat, the nation, India, and Bharti therefore becomes a symbol or an emblem of each of the women in this India, and then also symbolic of uh, Mother India as well, where we make India to be the goddess, to be the mother as Bharat Mata, right? But the kind of treatment that we have, the violence that we show i- on the land again, right? On the Bharat Mata as well, is very much characteristic of the violence that we show towards our women while deifying them, while making them out to be these goddesses. Okay, so these are the reading comprehension questions. Now the next question is the debate question, which you can discuss among yourselves, but I'll just give you a short hint. So the next question is, the little boy Bumba identifies completely with Mugambo, the screen villain. Right? Mugambo is your villain from Mr. India movie, played by Amrish Puri. So, how important do you think is this identification? What role does violence in television and films play in shaping the values of our generation? Right. So, Bumba is the one who is who is imitating Mugambo, who's saying all of his dialogues, who's talking about kidnapping, killing, and all of that, and he completely identifies with the character. So this is a reflection of how violence inherent in our society is reflected on the screen, and then how the screen itself propagates that violence into the minds of younger children who imbibe on that violence. And how is this justified? How is this propagated in effect? The next question is, the stereotypical image of India is that of Mother India, right? The feminine, protective, and motherly. Is this your experience of the country? How would you characterize India as a person? Write a 500-word essay on your idea of India as a human being. So, this is another question that I had referred to when we were talking about the significance of the title. Her name is Bharti, and the significance of the woman. So, you can write a short note about 500 words about the Mother India, the play Bharti, and how does it relate, right? How do we identify Mother India as a person? And then what does it suggest to us? What role do we ascribe to this idea of the nation? Okay.